Greetings, brothers and sisters, in the strong name of Jesus Christ. My name is Clark Boatwright. I'm going to be walking you through a little bit of an introduction here to the confession. So, this can watch before or after you've read the introduction, whichever is best for you. I'm just going to walk through basically what it's talking about and what might be some issues you come across with some words and context in it. So, this is just for the introduction. So I really want to hit what is the context of Augustine's confessions here. Okay, so who is Augustine? I just want you to know, like, if you don't know much about him or who he is, this is probably the most influential speaker in Christian or thinker in Christian history. Right, every group of Christians traces back their theology, their understanding of who God is, almost, at least in the Western church. Mary will make me say that. In the Western church goes back to Augustine, whether you're Catholic, whether you are Calvinist or Baptist, whether you are Methodist, whether you are Lutheran. We trace most of our theology back to Augustine. He's a really important thinker and a really great writer to read, and really not super difficult to understand if you understand a little bit of this context. So when we read the Confessions, what we really want to remember, as I move my face out of the way, is that this book is a prayer conversation with God that we are getting to listen in on. Augustine is praying, is talking to God throughout this. He is confessing his sin. He is confessing the glory and greatness of God. He is confessing with his mouth all the works of God and how God is going to continue to work through him, in him, in spite of him, right? So this is it's a really great listen, and to just put yourself in Augustine's shoes, and as you're reading this, to kind of think from that perspective of this is a prayer to God. So if you can read the words and think of them as being delivered to God, and he also knows we're listening. So he's being a pastor, knowing we're listening to this conversation, but really think about he's talking to God all the way through this. A big part of understanding Augustine, real quick, I'm going to show you, is understanding where he lived, and you'll understand his life story a little bit, okay? So I'm going to pull up this map here and show you that where Augustine lived, the Roman Empire was not one country. This whole area surrounding what's called the Mediterranean Sea was the Roman Empire. And so Rome was here in the middle of Italy. Milan, the capital, is up here. And Augustine lives over here in what today is a country called Algeria. So this is Africa. Africa is part of the Roman Empire, but think of where he lived as kind of being like Topeka in the United States. It's part of the United States, but it's not like where anyone who wants to be successful and thought of as wise and intelligent and great is going to be living, right? So he's from this part of Africa, and the whole story of his life is he's trying to move up. His parents want him to move up. Everyone wants him to move up. He moves to Carthage, the biggest city in Africa, for learning. He then moves to Rome. So his whole life is about moving up the ladder, more success, more success, more success, right? And eventually getting to Milan. But what he's going to explain to you is that none of that made him happy. But it is important to understand that that's kind of where he's from, is kind of looked at in the same way that Topeka would be looked at in the United States. It's like, oh, you're from Topeka? Okay. That's it. Like, but if you want to be someone, you want to be in New York, you want to be in LA, you want to be in DC, right? And so the beginning of his life is all about trying to get to those important places, all right? And that's this trajectory here, okay? Couple more things. When is this written? It's written in the year 450. Oh my gosh, numbers. 354 is when he's born, but he writes this in the year 397, which is about halfway through his life. He's been a bishop for about 2 years. He was only converted about 10 years before he wrote this book. And so that kind of leads to that. Why did he write this book? So Boulding kind of goes towards it, the translator of this book, in her introduction. But she says that it's very possible that people were like, okay, this guy's brilliant. He's a great speaker. He's a great writer. But didn't you know that how he lived before then? Haven't you heard? There may have been some rumblings, and maybe y'all are kind of familiar with this. Don't you know how this guy used to be? Don't you know how this woman used to live and used to act? And so he writes this possibly as a way of responding to that. Like, yeah, this is who I am. He lays it all out there. He is laying all of his sin out on the table, confessing his sin. But in doing that, he's also confessing God's greatness. And he's talking about the love and the goodness and the greatness of God here in these passages, right? It's a really great listen to. It's a really great book to read, to listen to hear the depth of Augustine's sin, but what God pulled him out of, right? And so there's a few terms here in the introduction of the book that might be hard for us to understand. And I want you to know that at this point in the reading, you don't need to know what these words mean. So some points of confusion. They talk a little bit about the Manichees that he joined and Manichaeism. It's a theological system that this religion that Augustine joined when he was young. And when we get to those chapters, we'll learn more about them. Okay. Same with the Neoplatonism they talk about. It's a Greek philosophy that Augustine was influenced by. But again, we're going to hit on those terms and those words when we get to those specific chapters where he becomes part of the Manichees, where he's talks about being influenced by Neoplatonism. Okay. So don't worry about those words for right now. For right now, just understand who Augustine is, bishop, leader of the ancient church, really important voice for us to listen to, and understand that this story is going to be about him as he tries to move up in the world, realizing my love is all in the wrong places. Where is God? Who is God? Him trying to find God and finally recognizing that God was with him all along. So it's a really great read. I hope you enjoy and start on chapter 1, and I'll put in some more videos to help us through chapters or books 1, 2, and 3.